Hey, it's me, Joe Pasevich. You know, let me tell you a quick little story about one of the battles I was involved with here in Marshfield. When they wanted to expand the airport, I fought to protect the environment and to protect the neighborhoods around it from the impacts. And I had to fight hard to get them to move this fence, which I'm going to show you. They wanted to put this big 8-foot fence on Plymouth Avenue with the big black vinyl slats on it. I had to fight to have them set that fence back from Plymouth Ave to preserve the scenic beauty of Plymouth Ave. And I got it done. And everybody agreed there'd be a vegetative barrier between Plymouth Ave and this big black ugly fence. And so a natural barrier grew in, and it's rich with nesting places for small birds. And Keith Douglas ordered his crew this past Saturday to come in here with the shredding machine. You can see it on the video there, and just shred everything here. Now I understand they need access to a gate here, but instead of stopping at just creating access to gate, they came in with the shredding machine, went through standing water and muck, and just destroyed everything. Do you ever wonder sometimes that your town officials and their friends don't listen to the people and don't care about maintaining the beauty and the quality of life here in Marshfield? You ever wonder about that? Look at the damage that's been done. Standing water, muck, vegetation, small trees shredded. Oh, and shredded. Look at the shredding. Oh, they'll say, oh, we have to remove the tall trees so they're not in the way of the planes that are flying in and out of the airport. But guess what? What do you mean? There's telephone poles here almost 40 feet high and heavy wires. And they're saying they had to shred all these shrubs and bushes to protect the airplane traffic. Imagine that. And Shoreline Aviation and Keith Douglas rent this multi-million-dollar airport from the town of Marshfield at a price what amounts basically to a cheap 2-star hotel per day. That's money that should be in your pocket, more money that should be in your pocket. Look at this mess. So now when you drive down Plymouth Ave, you've got to look at this. Well, what do you think of that, folks? Hi, it's me, Joe Pasevich. It is April Fool's Day, but we're not fooling around here. We are the source of truth and education for the residents of Marshfield and anybody else around the world that wants to learn the lesson of control room, which is if you want to understand what's happening locally, look at what's happening nationally and vice versa. And we've got a lot going on in the world, and boy, is there a lot going on in Marshfield. Some would call it a dumpster fire. Some would call it a catastrophe. Some would call it business as usual. What would you call it, my friends? Oh man, you know, it's really hard to know where to start, but I want to remind everybody that town meeting is coming up April 27th. April 27th, okay, Monday. Oh, but isn't the 27th coming up? Okay, sorry, April 27th, there it is. The graphic just switched on me. April 27th, 2026, that's coming up just a few weeks away. And also, now that meeting is going to be basically about, you know, Community Preservation Act, and maybe also there's going to be a motion made at that meeting to change the Board of Selectmen from a 3-member board to a 5-member board. And there are going to be various articles and motions like that to be taken up. But there will not be any town budget taken up at that meeting. That is going to be taken up on Monday, June the 15th. 2026, 7 p.m., both of them at 7 p.m. at the Marshfield High School. And here's the warrant that came out. It's available. I advise anybody and everybody, go to Town Hall and grab a copy. It's got this sort of chartreuse green, chartreuse colored cover to it. Okay, remember the song about the chartreuse microbus? Well, we got the chartreuse mini catastrophe here, and this is also good in case you like drop it in your yard. Okay, you can find it'll stand out. But so get a copy of this and begin to try to look at it and just get accustomed or familiar with the basics of it. You know, they keep saying $7 million deficit, $7 million deficit, catastrophe, gaps to fill. It's in the media everywhere. That's the narrative that's been pushed by the members from the school district, your school committee, and your school superintendent. And all the media is pushing this, the newspapers, the online services, including a service called South Shore News, which is fairly new. I don't know who's behind South Shore News, but they've got some very interesting articles, and I wonder, they do tend to basically propagate the establishment narrative. But get this warrant, that's another thing, we're going to talk about that in a minute. Get this warrant and start looking through it, because they're telling you, like I said, they're expecting a $7 million deficit. And the selectmen have already voted to include in this warrant, and here it is, override provisions. In other words, here's how much money we're going to spend if we do not have an override. Here's how much money in the next column we're going to spend if we have a $4 million override. And then further on in the book, there's not a table or a chart, there's just a paragraph that says, we want to be, the town meeting is going to authorize, the town meeting voters are going to authorize the town to borrow, or not borrow, but add $7 million to your tax bill, to your real estate tax bill. So in other words, there's three options. That's what the select board voted on the other night. You're going to have the option of going to town meeting and have the option of voting for a zero override, no override, in other words, business as usual, or you can vote to add $4 million to your tax bill forever, okay, $4 million additional per year forever, or you can vote to add $7 million a year every year to your tax bill forever. So that's the choices that you have. But, you know, there's so many problems with the numbers they're giving us. First of all, they haven't really justified or given us any description of where this deficit is coming from. And there are even things in the proposed table of appropriations that don't make sense. And I'm going to call your attention to two things actually. The first thing is that nowhere in this table of expenditures do you see the costs related to South Shore Vocational Technical High School. We have to pay for each student that goes to that school, and we have to pay our share of the debt to build for the money borrowed to build a new South Shore Voc Tech. You combine those two numbers, and they will eventually get up to close to $4 million a year, possibly, depending on how many students from Marshfield end up enrolling at South Shore Voc Tech. But in the proposed budgets and the numbers they're giving us, it's not here. Where is it? Where is it? We're supposed to be making payments on that starting in fiscal year 27, which is the budget we're voting on. The other thing I want to point out to you is that they have these columns, and in one column it says, here's the amount of money that we appropriated in 2026, for fiscal year 2026. And that number is given as $118 million, $118,724,000. That was what was appropriated in fiscal 26. Now, when you go to the column that says what the no override budget is being proposed, look at that column, $119,941,000. So what this chart is telling you is that we appropriated $118 million we appropriated last year. And the actual expenditure for fiscal year 25 was $118 million. But no, the no override budget for this year would be $119 million. Doesn't make sense. You're telling me for the last 2 years, over the last 2 years, the no override budget for this coming fiscal year would be $119 million, while in the meantime, we would have collected like over $7 million in additional revenues. So I'm wondering, where did all those $7 million go? That if we don't have if we vote for no override at this coming town meeting, we're going to only appropriate $119 million, when if you add the money that was appropriated from a year and 2 years ago, and then on top of that, add the additional revenues that have been generated in the town, it doesn't make any sense. So take a look at that. I hope we'll talk more about it, but basically they're saying the amount of money that's going to be appropriated this year for the coming fiscal year is going to equal within $1 million of the amount of money we appropriated last year. But again, from year to year, the amount of extra revenue that we have to work with and spend increases by at least $3 million. That includes the Proposition 2.5 tax levy increases, allowed tax levy increases, and local receipts. Local receipts are everything from dog licenses to, food tax, restaurant taxes, and building permits and such, okay? Which historically has been underestimated in this town. Every time we go to a town meeting, they'll say, and this is how the budget process works. Before you can come up with a budget, you have to say, how much money are we going to have to spend? And how much money does each department, including the schools, want? Now you have to reconcile those numbers. If you can't reconcile them and you need more to fulfill the wish lists of all the various departments in the schools, then you've got to have an override. That's how it works. And that's the beauty and the genius of Proposition 2.5, is that a town is allowed to discuss and vote if they want to levy more taxes on themselves, okay? There's nothing mysterious about it, and there's nothing nefarious or evil about Prop 2.5, as much as people like Steve Darcy, the outgoing, thank God, select board member, would want to tell you. So that's what the budget is looking like. Confusion, no clarity, all right? Confusing numbers that just don't seem to add up. As a part of that, let's see, where are we on my list here? There was a select board meeting. Now, moving on to the select board meeting that was held, like I said, there was a select board meeting where they did vote last week to put the 3 override options on the ballot, which was followed by Trish Simpson's resignation. There was a select board meeting 2 nights ago, Monday, at Town Hall, and the agenda, just to show you where we are at, just to show you how we're all just getting along so well, let's go into this now. The agenda for the select board meeting on March the 30th, Monday, was very simple. There was only one agenda item, really, for the select board to address, and that was an executive session. And the executive session was described as to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property if the chair declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the town. So most people don't even know this, that when a select board has a meeting, or any meeting of any public body, has to be an open meeting. They have to publish an agenda so people paying attention can anticipate what's going to be talked about and prepare themselves for it, maybe do some research. And the chair of any board or committee can always decide if the public will be allowed to participate in an open public meeting. The chair has that discretion. Some towns are very open, and even in our town, the DPW board, for example, has a tradition of allowing the public to participate in the meeting, and state law allows that, and in some places you'll read that it encourages it. But a chairperson can always decide whether or not they want the public to participate. Now, there's a session called executive session where that cannot be held in the public because they may be negotiating on a purchase or a sale, or they may be discussing a legal matter that they don't want out into the open public, all right, on the internet for everybody to know and hear about. They could be discussing a legal strategy related to a lawsuit, for example. But in this meeting on Monday, there was the regular lineup of procedures to be followed at the meeting, and one of them is something called public comment, which we instituted, about a year and a half ago, I think, 2 years ago. And that is where the public cannot be denied getting up and saying something. That's really not at the chairman's discretion, although the chairman can enforce rules on that. And every town has different rules. For example, in Marshfield, we have a rule that if you want to get up at the podium before a select board meeting and talk, you get 2 minutes, and cumulatively, all of the public comments cannot exceed 15 minutes of meeting time. Some towns will then tell you, and we need to make sure this is specified from now on. My advice to the select board is what some towns are doing is they're saying, if we go over 15 minutes of public comment time, you can write down your comment and submit it in writing to the select board. And some select boards in other towns will specify that the select board cannot answer your public comments. Public comments cannot lead to a debate. This is important. We're going to show you a clip of what happened at that meeting where this is a main issue. You cannot go up to public comment, say something to the select board. You can call them all kinds of names. You can insult them. You can talk about flying saucers. You can sing Yankee Doodle Dandy. But the select board is not supposed to respond. That would be a technical violation of the open meeting law, because then it would be a discussion of a subject that was not on the agenda. And you also can't ambush somebody with an accusation or a question or a statement of a fact where the other person would not have been aware of what you were going to bring up and would not be able to respond. As a housing authority board member, I can tell you many times people have come into meetings, people that don't like me, who suspect me doing something wrong, or just, like I said, simply don't like me, will come in and have a written statement and go on a diatribe about what a horrible person, Joe is. And all I can do is sit there, and at times the chair of my housing authority board will say, do you have any comment or response? What are you, nuts? Of course I can't respond. That's crazy. So anyway, that's what happens at these meetings. So the March 30th Select Board meeting, sorry to make a short story long, included public comment period. And let's watch that meeting and see how that thing degenerated into a free-for-all.
Mr. Chairman, Trish Simpson is a good person, and she served with the town's best interest at heart. She had the makings of a very fine selectman. She was intellectually curious. She was sincere. I wish her the best, and I wish she had given herself more time in this job. Charlie Sumner is a consummate professional and an outstanding town administrator. I'm sad he felt compelled to resign due to what he diplomatically referred to as recent events. It's disappointing to me that the numerous hours he spent answering questions and explaining issues didn't earn him the respect that he deserved. My first inclination was to resign with him as a It's disappointing to me. Excuse me, I'm speaking. My first inclination was to resign with him as a demonstration of my respect for him and my displeasure with the circumstances that led to his decision. However, I'm staying on in an attempt to get the town through its April 27th town meeting and to ensure that clear and transparent information is provided to the residents on the FY 2027 budget. If I left, I would be contributing to the chaos that I have been fighting against since I started here as the interim town administrator. Charlie was focused on the budget while I was working on the rest of town government issues, particularly collective bargaining. I'll focus my efforts on getting information to the advisory board, the select board, and the residents so they'll have a clear picture of what the impact of each budget option is. I'll be meeting with department heads tomorrow, asking them to identify the impacts on their departments of each budget scenario. We'll provide this information to the advisory board in public meetings. I'll meet with anyone who has any questions. I will do everything I can to help the town through this. I would ask for all town employees to stay focused on doing their jobs. I would ask residents to be constructive in their criticism and extend the courtesy that I have received universally since starting here to each other. If we work together, we can get through this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter.
Well, to me, again, according to the agenda, there is a Pledge of Allegiance. There is the chair's comments. That would be Eric Kelly's chance to make a comment, which he had no comments to make, so he skipped over that, didn't do anything with that. Then there is the town administrative report. I just want to make a brief critique. That, to me, was more of a political statement than it was a town administrator report, all right? I have a little issue with that. Now, the mic goes back to Eric, and what does Eric do?
Public comments.
Eric, before we go to public comment, I just wanted to comment on Charlie as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
So very quickly, I wanted to express my gratitude.
So Eric wants to go right to public comment, which is the next item on the agenda. But Steve Darcy jumps in, and Eric lets him do it. Now, Eric could have said, no, Steve, we're moving on to public comment. That would be the legal, technical, proper thing to do. But he doesn't. So Steve Darcy, as you will see, came prepared with a choreographed presentation, and he must have got help from Marshfield Community Media to pull clips off an old meeting, a previous meeting. So he's ready, he's loaded. He's locked and loaded, he's loaded for bear. He's ready to go after Eric. And Eric is being nice enough because Steve Darcy is saying, I want to make some comments about Charlie Sumner, who resigned. You see how you see the deception? Let's see what happens.
To Charlie as well and address some questions that are coming up. Frankly, two major developments in our town within the span of 48 hours. One question a lot of folks have had is about the status of the override. And the analogy that I would use is
You see, he's not making comments about Charlie. He jumps right into issues. Now, right there, then and there, this is a violation of open meeting law. If he wants to comment on override or any other topic that's not on the agenda, he can go to the microphone, to the podium to make public comment as a resident. But he doesn't do that.
in order for an override to go into effect, it's like a safety deposit box with two keys. The first key goes to town meeting, and the second key goes to the ballot box. Last Wednesday, the Select Board voted unanimously to give the first key to the voters at town meeting by putting override options in the town meeting warrant. What is left up to the board at this point to decide is what to do with the second key. Are we going to give the voters a choice and give them a second key to vote on the override at the ballot?
This is so wrong. I want to comment about Charlie. And then he's reading a prepared statement, and he's got this analogy or this imagery, what's the word I'm trying to think of a lockbox with two keys. Well, if you want to give us a primer on Prop 2.5, that's another thing. But you see the drama? You see the buildup that's going on?
Box, or are we going to swallow the key? So my question for you, Eric, is do you support putting the override question on the ballot for a special election to give the citizens a choice?
I already spoke of that. That would be no.
Your answer is no? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Eric, I did not hear what you said because your hand was in front of your mouth.
I said no. Like my previous statements before, it was a no.
And why is your answer no?
Why?
Yes.
Because I feel that we're spending too much, and I think $7 million is going to put a lot of people out of this town. So we're
Right,
moving on to public comment.
So you heard the voice of whom I believe is Martine Anderson in the background saying, Eric, I couldn't hear you mumbling, your hands in your face or something like that. And of course, leave it to an old school teacher. The next thing you know, she's going to tell Eric to watch his posture and sit up straight, okay? I thought that was a little bit amusing. But now Darcy, Again, engaging in a discussion that's not on the agenda and persisting and not letting it go. When I was at the select board meetings in the past, Lynn Fiddler and Steve Darcy would read the state law that says no person shall speak at a public meeting unless allowed by the chair. And if you do, you're going to be removed. If you speak without permission, you're going to be removed. So here's Steve Darcy again, Mr. Double Standard, okay? Mr. Get Away With All, who is pushing this confrontation with Chair Eric Kelly.
Moving on to public comment.
Eric, I'm not done speaking on this issue.
It doesn't matter.
It
Public
does
comment.
matter.
It matters.
James
It does
DuPont.
matter. We're not going to sweep this under the rug.
That
It's a
doesn't be
really
swept under the rug.
important issue. It is.
I've already spoke to
absolutely.
public about it. James DuPont.
First of all, Eric,
James DuPont,
the
please.
override is not $7 million. It can be reduced to any level of the
Either way,
town
either way,
you want.
Steve. Either way.
The same reason that
Mr.
you're
DuPont,
upset with
you're
the
free to
state,
speak.
you're now doing to the voters of
And what does Peter Moran do? Peter Moran, with his decades of experience being an attorney, decades of experience as a city council member, as a town administrator, he just sits there and he kind of like looks like he's grinning a little bit, just putting his head down. Unacceptable behavior. Unacceptable behavior. And then you'll hear people just attack Eric Kelly and come down on him like a ton of bricks. You could hear people in the audience there, you know, heckling Eric Kelly. It's just unacceptable, unbelievable behavior. And another sign of a double standard. You know, I remember when the naysayers were active, especially at town meeting in Section 10, you know, they'd get rambunctious a little bit, but nothing compared to this crew, which is desperate, clawing and fighting and scampering and swinging to regain power that they feel they have lost. People were duly elected to represent the voters of Marshfield, the taxpayers of Marshfield, and they don't like it because Eric or somebody isn't saying the right thing to please their ears. Unbelievable.
Marshfield by taking a choice away from them. So the same thing you're upset with the state doing to us about taking local zoning choices away from the voters, you are now doing to the voters by taking away their choice about what to do with their tax dollars and where they're going. You're taking that choice away from 22,000 people. Do you understand that?
Mr. DuPont.
Do you understand
You're here to speak.
that you put the override on the town meeting
Mr.
warrant
Darcy,
and set those
that's
wheels
the end
in
of it.
motion?
That's the end of it, Mr.
Fine,
Darcy.
I'm done with the override, but now I'm going to talk about Charlie.
You can, that's fine. You know something?
We owe
You
Charlie.
can sign up for public comment if you want.
I'm speaking right
Mr.
now,
DuPont.
Eric, on it.
Nope, Mr. DuPont, go ahead, speak. Thank you.
With your permission, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. DuPont.
For the minutes, James DuPont, 118 Elm Street East, Rainham. I'm an 18-year member of the Bridgewater-Rainham Regional School Committee and a former two-term selectman in the town. These are for the, I have a copy for the minutes with my name and address and these remarks, which I'll leave with you for future consideration and record it into the minutes of this meeting. Mr. Chairman and members of the Marshfield Select Board, I come with a message of grave and immediate importance to the property owners and voters of Marshfield, the members of the Marshfield Select Board, and the administration and staff of Marshfield's municipal departments and school system. The issue is
Okay,
twofold.
whoops.
First, it concerns the decades-long underfunding by the Massachusetts.
We're going to skip ahead because all we have to look forward to after this is a comment by Greg Guy, okay, which you really don't need to hear. And Mr. DuPont made a good presentation, and to summarize what Mr. DuPont was saying, and he was involved with Citizens for Limited Taxation, and he was basically making the pitch that the reason why so many towns are experiencing these deficits and budget crises is that our state aid is going down. The state takes so much money from the voters of the towns, and they're not giving it all back. They may take $500 million in taxation from the residents of a town and give the town back, who knows, something much less. And that's part of the problem, is that we're just not, state aid is not keeping up with what our expenses are. And there are a lot of unfunded mandates, which was a big topic of discussion with regards to MBTA zoning. And there are a lot of unfunded mandates within the school system, which we talked about last week. Eric Kelly got up at the last town meeting last spring, and he said to the superintendent of schools, do you have unfunded mandates, and what do they add up to? I don't know if we should play that clip again. What do you think?
The one big question that's been going around, especially with MBTA communities, is unfunded mandates. How much does the unfunded mandates cost in the schools right now?
So, Mr. Moderator, it's high and sort of uncalculable. There are many unfunded mandates that hit us, and we have to attend to that. Mr. Kelly?
Do we have a number?
I do not have a number.
Can you get that number?
Yeah, actually, I'll have Assistant Superintendent Martin talk a little bit about our curriculum and the unfunded mandates. That might be clarifying.
Basically change the subject, okay? Don't give Eric Kelly or anybody an answer to that question, okay? But anyway, so that was basically Mr. DuPont's comments. Now, there was an article written about that somewhat contentious meeting, if you could call it that, where Steve Darcy got out of control, all right? He got out of, he escaped from his playpen and just went on a rampage. I don't know what he was trying to do. Obviously, grandstand, try to get attention, get the crowd riled up. I don't know. Who knows? All the things that he accuses other people of doing, all right? So there's an organization called South Shore News, and it's the Times Media, South Shore Times, but it's part of something called the Times Media Group, which I'm not familiar with. And the author given on the byline here is Nick Pulio, and I don't know much about Nick Pulio. Hey, Nick, maybe you can come on the show sometime and introduce yourself and tell us where you're coming from. But here we go. 2 Men in a Room, clever little title. A year of political disputes and administrative turnover culminated in a March 30th Selectboard stalemate over Marshfield's budget. I don't know what the stalemate they're talking about is. What stalemate is there with regards to a budget? Did anybody out there see a stalemate developed during that brief meeting between Steve Darcy and Eric Kelly? Eric Kelly previously has voted against an override and putting an override on the ballot. He's against overrides in general, and he's voted against some of the override questions. But he's right now is still not in favor of an override, and only the selectmen can put that on the ballot. So Eric is not going to change his basic philosophy just because now there's only a 2-man select board. Why would he? Okay? And who wants to go vote on an override? We can discuss it at town meeting and try to iron out all the weird numbers that don't make sense. But why would you want to vote to give yourself a $7 million override, which over 3 years is an additional $21 million in taxes on the property owners of Marshfield, when you don't even know if these numbers make sense, when nobody's been able to justify or explain the raise? So here we go on the article. The meeting lasted 22 minutes. The room was mostly quiet. The agenda was brief, but the moment carried the accumulated weight of a year's worth of disputes, resignations, and unfinished business. Really? I don't think so. I thought it was Steve Darcy trying to grandstand and trying to put Eric on the spot. And again, like's been done over the last year, try to make Eric look bad as much as they possibly can. Across from him sat Vice Chair Steve Darcy, nearing the end of his term. But between them, and this is an interesting line, between them sat a problem neither man had fully created, but both now owned. The town was facing a $7 million budget gap. This simply is unproven and unsubstantiated. How can you say that? They were the entire board because Trish Simpson had resigned. Skipping on down, what remained of Marshfield's elected leadership were 2 men who did not agree on a central question facing the town, sitting across the same table with no way to move forward without the other. A tie vote meant no action at all. Well, they weren't there to vote on an override or an override ballot question. What are you talking about, Mr. Pulio? That's not what the meeting was about. You know, come on, catch up, you know. Anyway, moving on down, towns like Marshfield are not supposed to end up here. Coastal, middle class, and proud of their New England tradition of self-governance, they rely on systems designed to prevent this kind of paralysis. Really? We have a system to take care of paralysis. It's called a special election, all right? And it's called a town meeting, and it's called a procedure for overrides. It's all on paper. It's all established law, Mr. Pulio. There's nothing that's paralysis. You have to have a process, and the process is being followed. And we elected Eric Kelly as an anti-override, pro-taxpayer candidate, and he was elected. All right, surprise, surprise. A lot of people cannot make it now. You cannot make ends meet. Go to the supermarket, look at your insurance bill, look at your utilities bills. You can't make it. You just can't. People are like crying out for relief. Reduce the CPA tax, for example, anything just to give people a little bit of a break. Now, personally, I will make the comment that it is possible a small override would be necessary because we did take on the South Shore Voc Tech project, okay, and make the Voc Tech available to Marshfield students. We got to pay for that, all right? That's like $20,000 at least per student if they choose to go to South Shore Voc Tech. Because of factors like that, and not knowing what the contracts for the teachers, the fire, and the police are going to amount to, you have to anticipate that you could need a very small override. Part of the problem is that we're carrying a bunch of overrides right now in what they call debt exclusion overrides to pay for things like the new high school, to pay for things like the new school roof that we voted on recently. All of these things are debt exclusion overrides, which are additional taxes on you to be paid by property owners. And those things will not go off the books and be fully paid off for at least 20 years. All right, so we got to carry those burdens. And now you want to put another burden on top of us, this time in a forever override? That's the issue that we face, okay? One official summarized the problem bluntly during a board discussion, quote, "How are we going to justify moving forward with a $710,000 payment for the South Shore Regional Vocational School when town meeting hasn't approved it?" said then Advisory Board Chair Smith. That's a dangerous precedent. Really. The man just did not have a handle on the budget, all right? That was the big controversy last year, around the time Mike Maresco was getting ready to sail to calmer seas. There was the issue of the $710,000. It was a big mystery. It wasn't a big mystery. The money was always there. And Rick Smith just did not have a handle on what was happening while he was on the advisory board. But now he wants to tell you that he's the solution and that the select board is the problem. When the problem, and I'll say it again, it's not the select board. The town administrator was supposed to have created a budget and given it to the select board at the end of January. Okay? That's more than 2 months ago. They didn't do it. And now you hear Mr. Moran, who's our now remaining interim town administrator, talking about, oh, we're going to try to work things out. And nobody can understand or substantiate these numbers. Moving on down. The search for a permanent replacement for the town administrator began while the work of government continued simultaneously. Peter Moran was brought on as an interim administrator on a part-time basis. The $700,000 question, which I just alluded to, that had started the year remained unresolved. No, it didn't. Residents who attended select board meetings pressed officials for answers. That would be me and Pam Keith. Or I should say Pam Keith and me, all right? She's done a great job, and she's always on the forefront of these issues. Those officials were still trying to find them. Really? Now, Trish Simpson gets elected, moving on down. After Trish Simpson was elected, it was time to now choose a new selectman. And normally, by tradition, and common practice, the person who's in their third year on board the select board or any board becomes the chair. But what did Trish Simpson say when it came time to vote? Steve Darcy was up to be the next chair of the select board, and Trish Simpson said, quote, "I feel like I cannot in good conscience nominate Mr. Darcy because of the way he has treated our residents in the past," she said. Quote, "And also he has been going through some personal issues, and I'm afraid that this might take away from him being chair, his responsibilities," end quote. She also addressed reservations about Kelly. Quote, I do have some reservations with Eric being chair and the fact that talking to a lot of the residents, they're not happy with the way he has voted in the past," end quote, Simpson said. So she ended up not voting for Mr. Darcy, but voting to make Eric the next chair, and that's where Eric has been. And since then, the opposition or the regime who wants to restore power has been going out of their minds. Now, I come up in this article, and just the last thing I'm going to talk about with regards to this article, a friend and a summoning, according to this article by Mr. Pulio. July brought the year's most dramatic confrontation to that point. A friend and a summoning. Now, what is Mr. Pulio referring to? And why is this mentioned in here? This article was about the confrontation between the remaining members of the Select Board and the override crisis. So Mr. Pulio gratuitously, in my view, throws in this little rehashing and rewriting and revision of history by writing, July brought the year's most dramatic confrontation to that point. Housing Authority Commissioner Joe Pasevich had used his local cable television program to accuse Police Chief Bill Tavares and other officials of conspiring to pursue criminal charges against him for political reasons. Wow. Is that poetic license, or is it just an outright fabrication, lie, embellishment? It's not right. It's completely, it's untrue. Housing Authority Joe Pasevich, yours truly, did not use his local cable show. Joe Pasevich uses this local cable show to help keep you informed, to engage in debate and dialogue, to try to get you to make comment and be involved, okay? You can contact me, you can come on my show. That's what I tell a lot of people. Police Chief Tavares and other officials were never accused of conspiring to do anything. And I never said that Tavares was involved in conspiring. I said I saw Phil Tavares at the courthouse. And like I said before, I'll admit it could have been his doppelganger. All right? I do know what Bob Parkas reported directly and on his show, is that during a break in the court proceedings, and this was when I was arrested at the junior high school, basically for bringing my son his lunch. Bob Parkas talked to an official, a high official in town, and he expressed to the official, geez, I'm worried about Joe. He might get convicted and put in jail. And the other official said, I'm afraid he won't be convicted. That was the mood, and that was the mood that was prevalent and palpable, okay, throughout this whole thing. And that was the trial where I was found not guilty. That took the jury like 10 minutes to say, this guy's not guilty, get out of here, all charges dismissed. Tavares, the allegations went far beyond normal political criticism. That's a statement. That's a statement by Mr. Pulio. The allegations went far beyond normal political criticism. That's ridiculous. That makes no sense. I was comparing what Karen Reed's family had gone through. I was saying that Karen Reed's dad had done an interview and had expressed the idea that if the state or someone in the state or in the government wants to go after you or wants to prosecute you, they've got all the time and all the money in the world to do it, and it's your money. What did Jerry Williams used to say all the time? That's exactly what Jerry Williams always said. The state has a blank checkbook, a blank check. They have all the money and all the time to make anybody's life miserable that they want to. And that is going on to this day with the kind of lawfare and propagandizing that we see on all levels of government, particularly on the national level right now. they accused, the allegations by this guy, Joe Pasevich, they accused law enforcement officials of misconduct. Another lie, another embellishment, not true. But why is Mr. Pulio trying to bring these points to the forefront at this stage? Could it be there's a select board race coming up? Tavares responded, again, I'm free to speculate, I'm free to analyze and interpret politics and events in government as I feel. Tavares responded by calling Pasevich directly. According to the chief, he wanted to give Pasevich an opportunity to retract the accusations before the situation escalated publicly. Pasevich saw the call differently. In his telling, it was a threatening conversation in which the chief warned him to prepare for an onslaught if the accusations continued. Again, inaccurate, embellished, not true. Pasevich, who many say is a close personal friend of Kelly, filed a formal complaint. Well, that's what I did. As soon as I got off the phone, all right, the second time, I had to write a letter. I had to write a letter to the select board. All right? And I had to convey, while it was fresh in my memory, I had to write things down. The first time I got a phone call, I was in my car driving to church, 8 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. So I didn't have a chance to pull over and type everything down. Besides, it was a very, very brief conversation. And that conversation, if you could call it that, was played, was recorded. Imagine you get a call. This is a recorded line from the police, and this is the chief. You know, take back what you said on your show. What? I can't, what? I'm in my car going down the highway. I'm not even supposed to be on the phone. I can't talk to you right now. All right? I'll see you around when I get back. I'll see you around. It was like, there was no commitment. I didn't say call me back on an unrecorded line, which is what Tavares and his attorney, with his attorney sitting beside him, tried to say. That's not true. I just did get another call on a Tuesday, 2 days later. Anyway, so that was embellished. That's being brought out there. For what reason, I don't know, but obviously to try to smear Joe. Now the article goes on, and now it tries to highlight, and sort of again in a gratuitous manner, an alleged confrontation between the building commissioner Andrew Stewart and Eric Kelly. Then it goes into the failed recall effort. Because the petition did not gather enough signatures to qualify, the recall never advanced to a town-wide vote. Kelly remained in his position as chair of the select board even as the tensions that fueled the recall effort continued to shape debates inside town hall. That, I don't know where he gets that idea. Further on down, by early winter the budget troubles emerged. Department requests exceeded projected revenue by roughly $7 million. Oh, are the budget requests the so-called deficit? And if the budget request exceeded the revenues by $7 million, well, what were the revenues? If the revenues were $4 million and the budget requests were $7 million, then we have a $3 million potential deficit, right? That's with taking into account the wish list for all the various departments. But it doesn't even say that they had a definite number on revenues. Again, unsubstantiated information. That's about all I can say about this, except to say that finally it goes back to the meeting of March 30th, 2 days ago, and it says the meeting ended. Marshfield moves forward. With only 2 members present, the board required unanimity to act. No motion could pass. No direction could be set. But guess what? It wasn't on the agenda, Mr. Pulio. Okay? So there is nothing to do. There is no motion. There is no vote on an override ballot question. But the potential overrides will be discussed at town meeting in June. Okay, June. Remember, folks, get the green book and decide what happens, okay? When you go to the advisory board meeting preceding this and then the town meeting, we'll have time. So are things rough around the state with different towns? Have you heard what's happening in Lexington?
Now at 5:30, dozens of job cuts are coming to the Lexington School District, and teachers are planning to rally tonight to fight back. The district blames a budget deficit. I'm Courtney Cole.
And I'm David Wade. The announcement comes just 6 months after voters approved the money to build a new $660 million high school. WBZ's Louisa Mueller is in Lexington tonight, where families are frustrated.
Schematic design for a new Lexington high school proposes.
This is a virtual tour of Lexington's brand new high school, approved by voters last year with a whopping $660 million price tag, paid for by a temporary tax hike just for this project.
People are stressed, they're upset.
But just months later, the town is dealing with a different type of budget shock. A shortfall leading to the elimination of 65 full-time teachers and staff and 160 early career educators in their first 3 years in Lexington schools.
This hasn't happened since probably the early 90s, so I think that's what is extra shocking.
The heads of Lexington's teachers union told us it's the largest cut they've seen in decades.
You know, do we think that the price tag of the high school should have been that high? I don't think so.
Did you vote for it, Ms. Laskowski? Were the voters of Lexington told what the consequences were going to be for voting for a $600 million plus new high school? Where does the money come from? Does it grow on trees? The money tree. The money tree. Oh my goodness, I've got to find that poem. Barbara Anderson from CLT wrote a poem for me called The Money Tree. The money tree, where everything is free and we can walk hand in hand down the beach together while one of your hands is in my back pocket. Anyway, I have to find that poem and show it to you sometime as soon as possible. But there you go. Lexington, by the way, it makes you wonder about the intelligence and the education of the voters there when they voted to adopt MBTA zoning, and they basically, I think they almost doubled the number of apartment units that they were going to allow. Like each town gets an assessment. Marshfield, to adopt MBTA zoning, basically had to agree to build over 1,000 apartment units right here on Route 139, Plain Street. And that was the minimum we had to agree to make allowable. By right, a developer can come in and say, I want to build 1,000 apartments and I'm going to use this land over here because I bought it and I've secured the control of it. And the town can't go through the zoning board or anything. By right, they just get to build 1,000 apartments. Even a 40B has to go through the zoning board before it can be built. But MBTA zoning, you get to build it by right. And that's what happened to Lexington. As soon as they passed MBTA zoning and they made an allowance to double the number of apartments they would otherwise be required to build, the minimum they would be required to make available to be built, I should say, the developers went to town hall and started putting in their applications saying, I'm building this, I'm building that. No zoning board process, limited reviews, just don't build it on a wetland, those kinds of restrictions. And the people in Lexington said, what have we done? They went back to town meeting, they amended the law, and they took it out and they cut down, they reissued the MBTA zoning bylaw for the town of Lexington and cut down the number of units that they could build. And by the way, that's also in the warrant to be voted on April 27th. Will we rescind MBTA zoning in Marshfield? We can do it. We can take back control of our zoning. Monday, April 27th, come to town meeting and vote to rescind, that is to say, get rid of MBTA zoning in Marshfield. Now, how are other towns handling some of these crises? We don't have much time to go through it, but in Middleborough, they have an interim town manager too. Tell your children, if you want to have a good living and you're a public service-minded person, become a town administrator, all right? Get your bachelor's in something like accounting or management or math, all right? Because a lot of people don't seem to understand math very well. And then get your master's in public administration or MBA, right? An interim manager in Middleborough has an interesting approach. His name is Joseph Perkins, another JP, has officially reset Middleborough's financial clock this week, unveiling a budget and operational correction plan. That's what we need in Marshfield, and I'll do it as a select board member, to institute a budget and operational correction plan designed to dismantle what he has described as a budget built on, quote, dreams, wishes, and unicorns, which is kind of what has been done in Marshfield. And in the past, your past administrators and select board have been very good at hiding the facts and being disingenuous, in my opinion, with people like the teachers union, people in the teachers union, which never really knows the true story. Quote, we need to stand shoulder to shoulder when making the cuts. Apparently they're considering cuts. He added, quote, people need to put the petty BS aside. That's number one, end quote. The plan serves as a high-stakes recalibration of the town's fiscal 27 budget, wiping millions in, quote, aggressive, unquote, revenue estimates off the books. You can't be too optimistic about revenue estimates, but in Marshfield, let me tell you that historically, revenues and local receipts in particular have been underestimated. In their place is a stark reality. Taxpayers must bridge a town-wide shortfall of $3.375 million through deep workforce reductions. Perkins has made it clear that he has no interest in cutting pencils or ink cartridges, noting that such minor trims will not solve the town's massive budget gap. Remember, budgets are over 80% salaries. All right, when you want to buy a truck or build a school, it's a debt exclusion override is how it's usually handled. Although some major expenditures can be paid by just writing a check. Sometimes we had that much free money laying around. Quote, the problem is there are too many people, Perkins said. Too many people. I don't know what he means by that. In a definitive stance, Perkins stated that employees will be cut before services, emphasizing that the town's priority must be the continued delivery of essential operations to the public. That's a great philosophy, and that's what we need at the Board of Selectmen, is we need a new philosophy and a good philosophy that emphasizes the maintenance of services and a line-by-line review to find out where we have gone wrong and where we could be going wrong. And you know that and again, over 80%, I think at the school department, it's like 88% of the budget is salaries. And so whenever people talk about, you know, the pencils and books and, you know, whatever, it doesn't make sense. Basically, there's enough revenue coming in year to year, additional revenue coming in from local receipts, like, you know, building permits, and increased taxation on new buildings, and through all these various licensing fees, et cetera, that the town has. There's always enough revenue coming in through those sources that you can cover your increased expenses or cost of expenses in a town. The real driver of overrides is raises. And you cannot give out 3% raises. Trish Simpson said herself at her last select board meeting that when she was a teacher in Norwell, she went 4 or 5 years with 0% raises. I'm not advocating for 0% raises, but historically and intelligently, you cannot give out big raises, either to administrators, where like in the police department, you got people making over $300,000. You get other administrators making massive money. You can't have that. And you can't give any particular union or group a 3% raise. You know, you just can't. Yearly raises need to be in the 1% to 2% range. That's it for me. I'm Joe Pasevich. I hope I gave you something to think about and to ruminate on. I hope to see you next week. But meantime, around town, you see me, please stop and say hello. Thank you very much. Have a good night and a great weekend. Happy Easter.